This is Bellevue, Missouri. Looks familiar. We're in a time like nowhere we've been. Everything we do not knowing what is coming. Today you will hear about old trends, new trends, and how to use them in your towns. You are the people who will save your community. There are three things that will never leave rural, and all of them are experiencing innovation at the speed of light. How can you bring this innovation into your towns and create more economic stability? You can't raise a herd of cattle in the city. We still have to have farmers. And we do know farmers are an inventing sort of people. Here's some innovation since 2018. Drones that are actually easy to use and monitor your fields even better. EFRs, which is electronic field record, that includes weather, soil data, farm practice and workflow, visual imagery, and then it all gets applied into artificial intelligence. The result automatically generates recommendations to help farmers make smarter decisions. A unified dashboard enables growers to easily visualize this data and alerts related to critical elements such as weather and soil conditions and evapotranspiration rates and crop stress. Blockchain, joining in all the decision makers in a process to create better smart contracts. This is a favorite of mine, plant tattoos. On corn, they actually measure the use of water down to the roots and back up through the leaves. Energy and natural resources. The oil will be in a stable period and its annual production peak is going to be around 2040. Natural gas is entering its heyday period right now, and its annual production peak will be around 2060. Well, green energy brings new green money and jobs, solar, wind, water, geothermal, bioenergy, and nuclear. Those three things aren't going anywhere. You have to have rural to support those three things. And finally, wildlife and nature conservation. So what innovations are being looked at? This is what National DNR is looking for. The prevention of poaching and wildlife trafficking, the promotion of wildlife conservation, more green, the management of invasive species, the protection of endangered species, and the non-lethal management of human-wildlife conflicts. Very much green, very much safer for everybody. So of those three things, you can just imagine how you and your members of your community can jump on the opportunities, because they're not going to be anywhere else but rural in small towns. There's some new trends. Now this one lets you think about an experience in vacationing. You don't have to go far. You don't have to get on a plane and go fly to see a statue when you can take a road trip. And local travel is really being looked at for this summer in the light of COVID. Seniors are moving to rural. Did you know that 20% of those over 65 are already in rural areas? And 50% of shopping in rural is done by seniors, local shopping. Your retirees are coming back home and they're looking for something to do. They're not coming home to die. And this is an opportunity for you to consider your housing, rental, rehab and repair, housing with services, assisted living, and second-story housing. The millennials are moving to rural too. Now here's an interesting fact. Millennials already own 40% of millennials already own their own home, 43% rent, and 26% of millennials are actually moving to small towns or rural communities. Starting a business is easier in a rural area. And these folks tend to work in the gig economy, so they're looking for a place to live. They're not looking for a job. That comes next. They're looking for a slower pace of life, a closer knit community, and an opportunity to be a big fish in the smaller pond. What we really need to concentrate to serve both seniors and millennials is broadband, better broadband. And the most important thing you can do is pick up your phone and write a letter to your legislator and get them on the ball. We're going to see the end of meet and plan. So gone are the days of 6 white men in a back room, suit and ties, making all the decisions, creating the project, and finally telling the people, here's our project, this is what we're going to do. That's the old meet and plan method. Programs and formulas still ask us to, they still want us to create more committees, hold more meetings, take more votes, set priorities, and write more plans. And they're based on those old values, and they're certainly closed to new ideas. It's still the same old organization chart. Well, what if you gave up the meet and plan? What if you did meet and do? This is in Faulkton, South Dakota. A group of us were out there, and we were meeting and doing. You know, everyone that's interested comes together and gets things done. There is a trend in the revolution in assistive technology. So right now we're watching that revolution as it's coming about. So you're already familiar with, you've heard of artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, robotics, voice recognition, smart assistants, sensors. They're all emerging, and they're all changing the way that we're going to work together in the future. In fact, this new assistive technology, that's a great word, assistive. It assists us to do the things we like to do. Let them do the back-breaking, boring work, and it will free you up to do the more innovative work and create new ideas. All right, how can we use these trends effectively? Start by focusing more on your own people. Stop paying people to bring business to your town that will drain your resources. Forget about retail attraction. Skip trying to attract outside entrepreneurs. Never ever give incentives of any kind to chain businesses. And leave the corporate site selection RFPs over to the side. What do you need them for? You don't. And support your own local entrepreneurs. Cut down the barriers to entry so even 1 square foot business idea is valued, encouraged, and possible. Create more shared spaces. And let's take a look at some temporary solutions. How about pop-ups? This was during Ladies' Night Out, and a local woman knits beautifully. And she set up in an empty building and sold almost all of her product in one evening during a temporary pop-up. You can pop up in a store. Maybe that's an empty space that's ready for rent already. It could be another store's second store. It could be a home business trying out their products in a trial run, or even a nonprofit that sells things. Use the spaces that are already available. Number one, it helps that business person, but it also helps the building owner to show off their building and what could be possible inside. Photos. This is in an empty shop, coffee shop in the store in Minnesota. Coffee shop was on one side. They had this whole empty store. Well, they used the wall. They asked a local photographer to come and put up some pictures so that they had something there for people to look at until they could rent that side open. Now you can do this in any business on a blank wall, and it doesn't have to be retail. It could be a local insurance agency. This gives eyes on the work, but it also gives eyes on the empty space. And if you have your own business like an insurance company, it brings people through your front door. Exhibits. Museum on Main Street is the access to the Smithsonian for small town America through museum exhibits. And they do research, educational resources, and programming. They've actually visited 1,600 communities across America since 1994. You could make it even easier. Ask your local historical society to work with some middle school students to put together something about your local history, to create their own exhibit, and do it in an empty building, or do it where there's room. How can you use art in your town? This picture, so sad. As a building buyer, do you think I want to buy that building that's all boarded up and it has an old 1970s funky roof thing there? No, of course not. But they could cover the boards with really cool pictures. They could trim those trees down. At least do that. This is in my hometown. It's second story art. So I'll talk about the people that bought this building in a little while, but the top part is empty and it needs a lot of work on the inside. And the old windows were just boarded up and they looked really awful. The community vitality director found a program that involved students at the University of Iowa, and they created this idea. Large pieces of wood were stenciled by an artist and then painted by citizen volunteers. And each one of those images represents important people and things in our community in Webster City. And it is just beautiful. Let's talk about how we can make things look a little more real. This is actually an empty building in Hollis, Oklahoma, population 2,600. Looks like a barbershop, right? No, it's not. It's a printed banner that's hung inside. Even the barber pole is not real. Does that not give you an idea of what could go into that building? You could choose things from the past or ideas from the future at a very small cost. In Columbiana, Ohio, they had this building. I had a broken window and it was boarded up, and they were waiting to rent it out. The owner wanted to rent the facility out and then he'd fix the window according to what the people wanted. So the city manager had a better idea. He invited a local artist to paint a scene on that board, and he asked them to do it during a local downtown event so more people could come and watch this artist at work. It looked like that. That's the artwork that the gentleman created. It's beautiful. And people got to see him work, an experience all in itself. And of course, walk through the building. You know, anybody could do this to your empty windows. That's just some butcher paper behind, and the kids created snowflakes. And you could do that in July, Christmas in July, perhaps. You can certainly do it in October, November, Christmas season. Kind of lovely, kind of easy, kind of affordable. Next, I want you to focus relentlessly on being such a great place for your own people that others can't help wanting to be a part of it. Stop fretting about what will bring people to town. Just stop fretting about it. Recruitment is best seen as being attractive. Make your town more attractive. Be open to other people's ideas and dreams. The town you want to live in is the town you could be building together. Get rid of formality, regulation, and red tape wherever you can. No one's attracted to that. And do things like set up the Old Geezers Club. This is in Akron, Iowa. Group of coffee club guys. They meet every morning between 6 and 9 p.m. in an old schoolhouse that is empty. And they've taken over one room and the entire basement. Now, all these fellows are farmers that have moved into town. And this gentleman had the idea, well, let's just bring our woodworking tools here and see what we can make out of it. And that's exactly what all the old boys did. Pretty cool. They have, in that building, they also have other individual businesses on the first floor. And the building is starting to expand room by room by room. And they didn't wait until they had it full. It's a shared space. They waited till they had a couple of people in and opened it up. Back to the Old Geezers. That's a name they gave themselves. Now they call themselves the Down Under Club because they're in the basement. And I asked them how it was going. Did they have students and adults and people that wanted to come to this makerspace? And they said, no, nobody's come. And the most important question I could ask them was, who did you tell about it? And everybody was quiet because they hadn't told anybody. So we worked together and got some ideas about projects they could do with the local shop club, how they could get information out, how they could help people make furniture, how they could have a weekly skills class, all kinds of opportunities. And it keeps them busy, but it also brings more people willing to try a new project and not have to invest in all the equipment. Community gardens. This is Concrete, Washington. Beautiful community garden right down by the train station in the middle of town. But in the time of COVID, it's a little hard to effectively see how to do community gardens. So I just heard about a town, and sorry, I can't remember the name. I'll have to find it out. But their 4-Hers had planted seeds over the winter. They were cultivating the seeds in their basements. And then here comes COVID in February, and they had no idea what they could do. the city had a great idea. They went out and they bought up every bucket and container that they could find and gave them away to residents along with the plants. So the residents, you go through this town and there's little buckets and containers that are growing vegetables. Basically, they're mini gardens all over town. Now, the food that's not used goes to the local food pantry. It's an opportunity to get people to drive around your town and see who's doing what. And it's also an opportunity to help keep people fed. Okay, I've been to a lot of empty buildings, a lot of empty towns with empty buildings, but also roofless lots and empty lots. Each of you probably has one or two in your town. What can you do with it? Well, this is Wenatchee, Washington, and I want you to take a really close look at this picture. Tell me where the fake buildings are, and I'll bring somebody up on stage. That's right, smack dab in the middle. That's an empty lot. They took some plywood, painted fake buildings on them, and put it up until they can figure out what to do with that lot. And it also gives the community an opportunity to, well, maybe I could, buy that piece of property and build something and open it up. It lets people dream. That's always a good thing. By the way, one of those buildings has some chairs in front of it and little tables, so people can buy food and sit down there and eat. This is Porterdale, Georgia. That building used to be a community center and gymnasium, 12,000 square feet, and it burned down several years ago. Now, this is a town with 1,200 people, and as you can imagine, this was a huge eyesore. Well, a group of people got together, reinforced the walls, tore out all the crap, and just used the shell. They put a stage in there, and it's got hosted concerts and event space, food festivals, and weddings. What a great transformation. Brings people downtown. All of us like to take selfies. I don't know, I do. That's me in Brandon, Iowa. And they are known for the world's largest frying pan. Sits on an empty lot. There might be 500 people in town. Brandon's about 5 miles off a big highway. And you have to get off the highway and follow the signs to go to Brandon to see the world's largest skillet frying pan. And there's another business that's a restaurant in town. So once you've taken your selfies, you can go eat at the local restaurant. Great place to eat. How could you do something like that? This is in Tishomingo, Oklahoma. This was an empty space. They turned it into this gorgeous spot, and it includes a public washroom, which you can see in the middle of the picture in the back. And the community takes turns cleaning it up. It's beautiful. Where can you do that in your community? And of course, you don't need to have water, but it's just a lovely attraction. This is one of my favorites. Each of us knows somebody that has old equipment. You could, on an empty lot, create an outdoor museum, and it could be anything. There's old cars in Nebraska buried a quarter of the way up, and they stand straight up, tire to tire. You could have a rusted tractor graveyard, weather resistant or happily rusted artifacts. And how could they help tell the story of your town? Your committee of negativity might even get behind this one. This again is in Webster City. This used to be a half a block full of old buildings, very old buildings, and a fire started and they had to tear all the buildings down. Avila Bank created this park. The bank is back behind it, and they have a stage with electronics, much like this one, for concerts and events. And the bank doesn't charge anybody to use it either. You just have to let them know what you want to do. We did music in the park with local musicians every month. That was something that we tried one year, and it was wonderful. You could put a fitness zone in, outdoor exercise equipment for adults. Now, the Trust for Public Land has been working to bring those free fitness zones around. It's a great social environment where people can enjoy getting fit. Again, it can be spaced so that you're socially distant. They don't have to be right on top of each other. A huge living room. Make it more comfortable. Bring out a couch. In this town, The mayor comes out and holds conversations. It was a temporary art community project, but why not try it for a little bit longer time? Or have different groups utilize it. Come and have a visit. Come and have sandwiches. Hey, we're giving away ice cream today. All kinds of opportunities. This is in Lyons, Nebraska, and the Center for Rural Affairs took this former storefront, and it's a roofless building. There's no roof on that thing, and they cleaned it up. And what happens? They made it into a theater, and that front folds down, and inside is seating. And they bring a tractor with a screen on it, and they have an outdoor theater. You can bring your lawn chairs, or you can try to get a seat on the seats inside. It's a roofless building. So there's, if it's going to rain, they're not going to have a movie. But if it's not going to rain, you could have a movie on Saturday night. How about a beer garden in Paris? You can tell that building has no roof on it. It's 107 grand is the name of it, and it's a roofless building in Paris. And it's finding a new life as a beer garden. Now, doesn't that sound so much better and more entertaining than just a building with no roof? It's Paris, Texas, by the way, and here's a shot from the inside. They built a little kitchen in one corner, and they've closed that off, so there's no elements can't affect it. And it's beautiful and very inviting. And I just want to go down there and maybe have some ribs. This is in Cuba, Missouri. Now, many of you people have probably been to Cuba, Missouri. And this lot sat empty for 20 years. And they worked on it a little bit at a time. There's no rush for some of these things. Sometimes there's no money, so you have to work on it a little bit at a time. This is what it looks like today. Beautiful spot. Use those empty lots. Next up, I want you to focus more on local investing, less on creating profits for outside people. Let me repeat that. Focus more on local investing. Bring that Wall Street to Main Street. Don't create profits for people outside of town. Figure out how to create profits for people inside of town. And you can start by creating a local investment team. You could buy up rental houses one at a time so that outside real estate investors won't destroy their value for profit. Fix them up and rent them out. Loan money to local businesses in tiny amounts that the big banks can't ever touch. Loans under $50,000 are economically infeasible for banks, but is arguably the most important for your would-be tiny businesses. And I'm not saying you have to loan $50,000. You could start at $10,000. What would make a difference? And then also fund community projects that have a bias toward tiny individual and formal experiments. How many shared spaces could you create in an empty building? What do they need? Maybe they need to pay the utilities for 3 months. Could you loan them that amount or grant them that amount? Of course you could. And sooner or later, those shared spaces, the ones that stick around, grow into bigger businesses themselves. In Minneapolis, and I know that's not a small town, but this is a smaller neighborhood, and they buy vacant buildings. And a group of neighbors got together to buy vacant buildings, and now they're renting them to bakers and brewers. It's a cooperative. Any Minnesota resident could join the co-op for $1,000 and invest more through the purchase of different classes of non-voting stock. It's a lot of but I have $1,000, and maybe I could be an investor in a building in my own small town and see my community come to be the kind of place I want it to be. Please drive out the payday lenders. Let's talk a little bit about money. On a $500 loan that you get and you have 2 weeks to pay it back, that interest is $75. Now, most people can't pay that $500 back, so they extend it. They have to pay another $75. If you do that for a year, that's 300% over 1 year. That's about $2,000 in a year. Now, payday loans are really designed to trap you in a cycle of debt. When emergency hits and you have poor credit and no savings, it may seem like you have no other choice. but choosing a payday loan really negatively affects your credit, any savings you could have had, and may even cause you to land you in court. It's difficult. Send them away. Think of your locals. This is an empty lot in Tynesta, Pennsylvania. It was a full block size. A building was there and it had burned down. Sat empty for 10 years. Tynesta is in the middle of the Allegheny Forest and has a population of 500. And their economic development people thought and thought and thought and thought. And finally, one guy says, let's put garden sheds there. Let's make little tiny businesses. We can put garden sheds there. And another person on that board said, yeah, we could put fake 1800 fronts on them. And we can rent them out really affordably. And people would come to our community to buy whatever the products are. And that's exactly what happened. It's inexpensive garden sheds. They create tiny business products. There is a bakery that has baked goods there, has a bigger location in the town they're from. The winery that's outside of town is there. There's an older woman that makes clothes, doll clothes for American Dolls, the American Dolls, and she's not physically well. She's had cancer, but this gets her up every day and out and gives her a reason to still be around here. And it's actually a business incubator, if you think about it. Great place to start something. There's some restaurants there. They have a big green area where local people can sit down with benches and picnic tables and a stage, a small stage, if somebody wants to play their guitar and give a concert. This is in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Now, after Hurricane Katrina, there was some leftover housing from FEMA that didn't get used. And this was a big old dirty lot. And somebody had the idea to take those housings and make tiny businesses, tiny houses. And they built a deck around it too. Somebody made this idea up. They didn't have to return the FEMA houses. They didn't know what to do with them. Well, they figured it out. And it looks like this because they have a big green space in it where there's room for pop-ups, where the Girl Scouts can sell water for $1 a bottle because it's hot in Mississippi, of course. Small vendors can try things out, and if they're able to, they can graduate to the tiny houses. And some of those tiny houses can graduate to an empty building somewhere else in town, downtown perhaps. It's called Anchor Square. And then the next thing I want to talk about, just about every community I go to, I spend some time with the students because I want them to come back there. Let them go away to college, let them go start a job, get some experience, travel the world, but come home. And a lot of people do come home in their 30s and 40s with their kids. What if you let them take over an empty space for a month? Give them a free hand, help them if they need it, but let them try their ideas out. You know what, if it doesn't work, it was just a test. They were trying to see if it was going to work. Failure is a good opportunity to learn. It's not a reason to be scared. Let your kids experiment too. Now this is in, let me think, Henrietta, Texas. They have a lot of big ditches. So they have an area of town here, and then out on the highway, they have other shopping. In between is the road with big ditches. And somebody got the idea to just keep the wildflowers in the ditches. And less work for the city people, less mowing, no mowing actually, and it is really beautiful. There's an older gentleman in Clark, South Dakota. Every time a house comes down and it's an empty lot, he goes and scatters wildflower seeds. So in a year's time, they have a beautiful flowered lot, if it isn't already sold. Jefferson, Iowa, stands to reason they have a bench with Jefferson on it. That's my friend Carrie, and she's sitting on the bench by Jefferson. Great photo op. What other photo opportunities could you do in your town? Think about the sides of buildings. Could you paint murals? Could you put giant butterfly wings? Could you do things on what you think the future's going to look like? A million ideas. Next up, I want you to focus on everyone. Stop letting the STP dominate your leadership. Oh, STP, same 10 people. We all have them. Some have STP, same two people. When you, without even thinking about it, expect those people to have plenty of resources in order to participate, you miss out on some of your best people. Instead, try reaching out to everybody in town, every single one. The idea is to give people small but meaningful ways to participate. For example, you want to do a mural on the side of a building. Get permission from the building owner. I could do that. In fact, I have done that. Just call the building owner up and say, yeah, can we paint a mural on the side of your building? It would be really awesome and bring more traffic to your corner. 9 out of 10 times they say yes. Now, you also want to actively connect to diverse people, including Indigenous, Black, and all people of color. You're going to need innovative ideas to survive, and you're going to find more innovative ideas when you bring together people who don't share all the same backgrounds and all think the same. Involve people with disabilities and people with less financial resources by giving even smaller but still meaningful ways to participate. Not everyone can do the same things or afford the same things, but everyone has gifts to share. So for example, my friend Miss Daisy that lives in Springfield has rheumatoid arthritis and doesn't get out as much as she'd like to, but she's a huge champion of lots of people online. And you can find her on Twitter and on Facebook. And she shares information everywhere. She's Miss Daisy. Her name is Linda Krim. But if you're looking for her, it's Miss_Dazey. Definitely worth following. And of course, she's from Missouri. So why wouldn't you want to follow her? Now, where do you find some of these businesses? Now, this was in my community. The first year we did it, it's called Junk Fest. And everybody, lots of antique dealers, but also a lot of junkers, you know, people that remade furniture and did really cool things with leftover stuff, and people that do it for a business. But there were also people that had things to sell out of their basement. You know, they got mom and dad stuff when they died. So they set up a tent. Go to events like that and talk to people. See if they're interested in a shared space, even if only for a month. What if you could take all that stuff you have in your basement from when your grandma died, and it's really cool, but nobody wants it? You could do a shared space of really cool stuff that nobody wants. Somebody's going to get it. Somebody's going to look at that dresser and say, I could paint that, change the knobs on it. Oh my God, it would be awesome. Another way to find people is on Etsy. Now, I did a search for Pottery, Iowa, and I found these people, Tumbo Pottery. They sell some really cool stuff, porcelain pottery and some modern stoneware. They're working out of their home. How could I get them into a shared space? How could I get them into a pop-up to show up at an event and start really small with just a table and a little covering on it to share their things at an event? Look online for some of your people. I want to share this story about Brad Martin. Oh my goodness, Brad is something else. He makes this thing called WTF, this widget. It's actually wrench that fits, and it's designed to have spaces all along it, made of titanium, that is a wrench that fits on everything. It's pretty awesome. He is working in his garage. Little house in my town, works out of his garage. He used to work in the wind, but he's been so busy and so successful with using Kickstarter that now he's full-time. And the way I heard about him, a reporter from Des Moines called me and told me to look him up. So I did. Brad has raised over $250,000 in the last, since 2013, the last 7 years, to invest into his business and continue to sell more product. Brad Martin, WTF, worth looking up. Instagram. The Alexander brothers are a group of kids I shouldn't say kids, but a group of young men aged 30 down to 19, I think there's 5 of them. And they take cherry wood and they make cutting boards. They make knives by hand. All the work they do is by hand. And you can find them on Instagram. They have some amazing products. And they sell all over the United States. Well, why couldn't some of your folks do that? Who's on Instagram in your community that's making and selling things? What if you could set up some sort of makerspace where in the back, product is being made and I can come in and see that, and retail's in the front? Of course you could do that. And you could do that with just more than one business. Again, let's talk shared spaces. Next up, focus more on trying ideas in small ways and less on paying others to pick those ideas for you. I'm a consultant. I'm the last consultant that will ever come to your town and tell you what to do. I visit with you and find out what you want. What do you want to do? All right, let's find a way to do that. So you can do that in your town. Small ideas. If you can test an idea with duct tape and cardboard, maybe you want to put in a bike lane downtown. Well, duct tape it off and try it for a weekend. See who shows up. See who's riding bikes. See if there's any problems. You have a real life feasibility report, not some feasibility report you paid $10,000 from some expert in a big town to do. Don't pay for predictions. A professional guess is still a guess. Instead, your own people can and will run experiments once you get out of their way. Crowdsource the answers you need by testing tons of different ideas. Tiny failures are almost always free, high-quality evidence of what doesn't work. Big failures are evidence you didn't experiment small enough. Now, I had this idea. This is me and two folks out in Montana, and I wanted to do some coaching via Zoom. So I contacted these folks. I wanted to try it out first and see how it would work. The guy on top is an economic developer for 5 counties, and the young lady on the bottom is a chamber director. So we had a conversation for an hour on Zoom, and it was fabulous. It was really exciting for me because I got to hear the things they were thinking and what they wanted for their community. And then I was able to share stories from other communities that are already doing it. They were my case study. Oh, by the way, that is also COVID friendly. Back in 2013, I interviewed for the chamber director at Webster City, Iowa. And I drove through town, I counted 14 empty buildings. And I knew if I got the job that I was going to have to fill those buildings. That would be a requirement. And sure enough, I got the job. 1 month later, don't ever do it 1 month, give yourself 2. We had created, my staff and I created the Empty Buildings Tour. Of those 14 buildings, 12 buildings were on the tour. We talked about it everywhere, on Facebook, on the radio, in the newspaper, every social media avenue we could. We emailed chamber executives and economic development directors across the state. We just let everybody know about it. Now, not everybody's going to play. This was an owner that has 3 storefronts, and he kept, oh, I'm going to be on it, or oh, I can't do it, or I'm going to be on it. And finally, he put up a sign that directed people to Al the barber, who's just down the street from him. And go talk to Al, because you know Al the barber knows everybody and everything about the community. By the way, those 3 storefronts are still empty. The day of the tour came and went, and 44 people attended. That was a success. Several people talked about buying buildings and starting new buildings, businesses. At the wrap-up coffee meeting, everyone was excited. Now, during the tour, our chamber champions, retired people, came and told the history about that particular building. But what they also did was share their ideas of what could be there. Fabulous, fabulous tour. And there's a secret sauce. Keep talking about it. Every time somebody rents a building or buys a building, share that across the world. It's the most important thing you can do. No one bought buildings that night, but lots more people heard about it, and it did spark conversations. In this image, the lady on the left with the dark hair was a junker. She sold really cool kind of products that she had collected from people, and she did it out of the back of her van. And we went to visit her when she was set up. Cheryl and I went to visit her and said, you know, we got this empty building, and it's an incubator project. I'd love to have you there. And she came to town and looked at it. Ended up not being in that building, but bought a building. 12 buildings were toured. In 18 months, 10 were filled. That speaks success. Out of that tour came a couple of other things, an informal incubator project. And this is where follow-up is so important. We had a local building owner that had a couple of buildings downtown that were empty. And, you know, I grew up on a farm, and I know what an incubator is, where it's this big thing and the baby chicks run underneath it to keep warm. It incubates them till they can grow big enough. And I thought, what if we did that with an empty building? What if we gave free rent for 3 months, reduced rent for a year, and whoever goes in there pays the utilities. But they have to work with the chamber to learn some marketing and work with the Small Business Development Center to create a more formal business plan after they've gotten their feet wet. First of all, the building owners were thrilled because their utilities at least were being paid and they were making some money. And every building needs love, can't sit empty. And this provided that. Now, the business could leave anytime they wanted to. Did it work? Sure did. This particular building started out as an Italian restaurant. They lasted a year, and they moved because the husband was offered a job 3 times his normal salary in another state. Family always comes first, and that's part of the code of ethics of our town. After it became a Mexican restaurant. Now, this is interesting. The Mexican grocery store across the street wanted to open their own restaurant, but they were saving to buy a commercial hood. Those puppies aren't cheap. They took advantage in the meantime of the incubator project for 1 year. Really good food. After that, it became a new and used store with an artist who collected mostly unique things. She grew so much, she moved to Fort Dodge, a little bit bigger city, with her product. Another building they had was converted. Chicago Style came in and rented the spot for a year. And Chicago Style, they are, I believe, Mexican from Chicago, and they moved to a small town for better education for their kids and a safer way of living. Every 3 weeks, they go back to Chicago to buy product. And people love them. It kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger that they ended up buying another building right down the street, the one with all the beautiful artwork, because they grew to 3 times bigger. Now, all this turnover, that's a natural process. It happens in every town. It's like breathing. And it's better than an empty building all the time. The movie theater was one of those buildings that was on the tour. My first week on the job, the movie theater closed. Now, that was really frustrating. 2 years before, we'd lost our major manufacturer, and people were already just out of their minds. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back. A group of us got together, kept talking about it, formed a 501c3, and started raising money. The high school students made us movie trailers, and they named our group HERO, which is Help, Entertain, and Restore Organization. So we had to buy the building first, and we did some negotiating with the marketing department of Wells Fargo, convincing them that they really wanted to cut the price in half for us because it was good business for them, and they agreed. We had to take small but meaningful steps all over the place. Lots of ways to raise money. Usual bake sales and begging. The alumni clubs in our town are kind of a big deal. So we made up this idea to sell the seats at $300 a pop. We sold all 250 seats. And the alumni clubs came out of the woodwork, nonprofits, individuals, businesses. It was a big chunk of the funds raised. And it was a small but meaningful way for people to participate. Anytime a group bought a seat, the newspaper came over and took their picture. That was very active participation by the local paper as well. Finally, in 16 months, we had raised $250,000 in small donation amounts. And I'm talking, there were a few $10,000 donations from people that could afford that, but the majority were anywhere from $25 to $300. That's a lot of $25 donations. We bought the building, revitalized it, added digital equipment, and hired staff. Here's the important thing about that. Could we have used volunteers? Of course. But you know, volunteers get tired. And volunteers don't want to run a movie theater all the time. And that's not a good way for us to create to the economic development in the community. So we hired staff. The theater is still open today. Pretty awesome. In fact, After this COVID thing goes away, I believe in September they'll actually be open again. Not that COVID's going away in September, but we're figuring out how to deal with it better. Just a couple of more ideas for you. Now remember, lots of ideas are going to fail. We don't care. Most of them will fail. We don't care. It's free, high quality research, offering direct evidence of what works and what doesn't. That's what Clay Shirky said. So if you keep them small and very immediate, those tests, you can reduce the cost of failure to almost nothing. And then there wouldn't be any need to fear it or overestimate the risk. So if you look at this image, it started out with that coffee shop in the back, that little trailer coffee shop set up there. And the following Saturday, this is in Alva, Oklahoma, more people came up. Some food people showed up, some people selling things. So now you have this empty lot that people are utilizing every Saturday. In Mexico City, I love this idea. They built this beautiful dog park. And it really is beautiful. It's a little pocket park in Mexico City. In my town, our fifth graders took an empty park and put fencing around a part of it and created their own dog park there. They built their own toys so they could run over and run through and do all kinds of really cool things. It was a great project for our fifth graders. And people that walk their dogs are pretty good about picking up after them and even picking up after other people. In Detroit, they're turning vacant lots into sponges for stormwater. And it's a bioretention garden in the Warrendale neighborhood. So that's actually a garden. Now, you could do that in your communities for empty lots in your local areas. Why not? Until you get that lot sold, put some community gardening things in there. Figure out how to absorb stormwater. It's rained a little bit the last couple of days. I know we all have some stormwater sitting around. And one last thing. Don't worry about the committee and negativity. Those are the folks that'll tell you, oh, that'll never work, or we tried that before, it didn't work, or who do you think you are? They're never going to support you. You can't lose people who were never yours. Just ignore them. Go on about your business and create a wonderful town for you to live in. If you go to this link, write this link down, I have a free present for you. So it's saveyour.town/free. Becky and I talk about what the idea-friendly method is. It's 30 minutes long, and it'll share some ideas with you of other things that you can do. Thank you very much.